Hello, my dears. So the very anticipated Unite the Kingdom rally took place on Saturday 13th, and it's clear to many that it was a huge success. Many turned up with their flags in tow to join Tommy Robinson as they marched across London. Though there does seem to be some debate about just how many people were actually there. I've seen reports that there were tens of thousands, other reports saying that there was 100,000, but many people who were actually present at the event claimed the numbers were much higher, with some estimating that it was probably closer to 1 million, if not more. It has been really interesting to actually watch how mainstream media as well as social media have been covering this protest. A lot of the focus seems to be on how many arrests took place, as there were about 25 arrests from my understanding, because some people decided to attack police officers. There are also other media outlets I've seen try to downplay the numbers, such as this reporting I saw from ITV News.
But you know, this is a movement which has thrived on social media. Today, the organisers wanted it to show a real presence on the streets. Nothing like the 3 million people that Tommy Robinson said have attended, not even the million who he said would attend.
Now, this reporting is quite a sharp contrast from what I saw from The Guardian, who released a video of aerial footage of how many people they could see at the march. I guess you can make up your own mind on how many people you think were in that video. But what was also really interesting is that people who turned up there to counter-protest and to protest against Tommy Robinson have also said that they think the numbers, based on what they saw, looked way closer to 1 million.
And we've just gotten back from the counter demo against Tommy Robinson. And I think before we go to the lessons, we really have to look at the reality of what this demo was, and that is a pretty humiliating defeat. If we look at the numbers alone, Tommy Robinson's side seems to have gotten around 1 million.
The police said 100,000. It's obviously had more than that. And our side was totally, the counter demo was small, was really tepid, wishy-washy. And what was also surprising is how confident and emboldened the right was, because the demo was attacked at Whitehall, people were trapped, and, you know, they were ready for showdown.
One thing is for sure, there were definitely a lot of people, especially when you consider the fact that that aerial footage is not going to show you the people who were on the back roads, who may have been covered by tall buildings, and it also doesn't cover Westminster Bridge, which was also packed with people. I think the large turnout of this march stunned many, including the organisers themselves. Tommy Robinson has announced he will be doing another rally. I don't know when he'll be doing it, but he has announced that he wants to do another one. Because the organisers themselves, including Tommy Robinson, were not quite expecting such a large turnout. They hadn't set up enough speakers or screens for everybody to be able to see what was going on, which seems to be part of the motivation for why Tommy Robinson is very eager to arrange another one. Now, as I mentioned, when it comes to the reporting of this particular rally, it has been really interesting to see what kind of angle different news outlets have taken. Many have characterized it as being far right, and I have also just generally seen a lot of negative reportings in terms of the way that people describe the people who turned up to the protest, with a lot of hyper-focus on the arrests that took place. But one reporter who stood out for deviating from this was Sir Trevor Phillips, who recalled this account of what he experienced when he went to the march.
It's quite possible that the person most taken aback by the huge turnout at yesterday's Unite the Kingdom demonstration was its organiser, the hard-right activist known as Tommy Robinson. 150,000 people crammed into central London, most carrying national flags, the Union Jack, the Cross of St George, even the Scottish saltire, protesting about immigration, about free speech, and about the decline of Christianity. There was some fearsome rhetoric, including from Elon Musk, who called for the overthrow of the British government. At the margins, there was some hooliganism. But I think that for those who oppose Robinson and his ilk, the most alarming aspect of the event was just how normal the vast majority of the marchers were. I spent an hour or two amongst them, and my own impression was that they were mostly the sort of people you'd meet in a country pub or in half-time queue for the loo at football or at a concert. There was a sprinkling of black and brown faces, and the event was brought to a close by a gospel group singing Jerusalem. All that must worry the traditional mass parties, Labour and Conservatives, now polling at less than 40% between them. They're draining support to parties like Reform and the Greens. And yet, a man recently out of jail, condemned as an extremist thug by most mainstream media outlets, can rally a demo the size of the entire population of Cambridge or Blackpool. A feat you couldn't imagine either Sir Keir Starmer or Kemi Badenoch pulling off anytime soon. Perhaps the people are sending us all a message. Let's see if anyone at Westminster's listening.
What he's saying is true. These are just regular, ordinary people, largely normal, ordinary, working class people who have turned up because they have concerns about free speech, concerns about illegal immigration, and who've turned up because they want to see some change. Because the fact of the matter is, when it comes to those who are the most affected by the very poor decisions being made by the government, working class people do tend to pull the shortest straw. And so it was interesting to watch Trevor Phillips take a more empathetic approach and try to actually understand why the people were protesting rather than push a narrative about the kind of people that they are. I do think labelling this whole entire movement as just racist and far right would be a mistake, and it would require you to completely ignore the legitimate concerns of the people who turned up to protest. And I do think that in the case of politicians, it would be a very costly mistake for them to make. Now, does that mean that I don't think there were any racists at all in that protest? Not really. I mean, there are racists in this country. There are people who hate anyone who isn't white or isn't natively English. And there are people who do believe that anyone who isn't English should be deported. There are some ethno-nationalists who exist in this country and who would love to see anyone who doesn't look like them being kicked out of the country. I very occasionally see sprinkles of comments from people like that within my comment section whenever I make these kind of videos. But the ultimate truth is this: the people who actually genuinely think like that are a very tiny and insignificant minority. The vast majority of the people who turned up to this march do not have those views. In fact, the vast majority of people in this country are disgusted by genuine racism. So most people who would have turned up to this march do not hold those views, and the front man of this march also does not hold those views.
That's probably one of the most interesting things about you, is I think people see you as the kind of example of some sort of ethno-nationalist.
I don't believe in ethno-nationalism.
Yeah, and that there was. It's like people don't realise.
I always used to argue, and my argument during the English Defence League days is, are you telling me Ian Wright's not English? I love Ian Wright, yeah? And then people say, well, no, he can't be ethnically English. I say, okay, the ethnically English, but are we going to encourage people? So Ian Wright's here, he loves England. I've got mates, most of my mates who are not white, have all got England tattoos. They love England, served in the Royal Marines, born in England, parents born in England. They're English. Where do you want them to go? So I have this, and I get a lot of flack for this from the ethno-nationalists.
So do I.
Yeah, but the ethno-nationalists are very large in number online because they come from all around the globe and they jump on everything and they're very active. They're activists, yeah? Tell the ethno-nationalists to have their own demonstration on the street. There'll be 10 of them. That's the reality.
I've seen some people argue that Tommy Robinson has softened his position over time, but years ago he was very racist, especially during his EDL days. But from my research, I can't find any evidence of that. In fact, I've actually found evidence of the contrary, showing that he's actually been very consistent.
Right, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name's Stephen. I'm a member of the English Defence League. I said we're travelling to Stoke today, part of a national roadshow, where we are raising awareness to the threat of militant Islam and the threat of extremism in our communities, which it is in many of our communities that live in diverse communities. And we're just trying to raise awareness and bring the whole country together. So one of our main mottos, Black and white unite the colours, unite the faiths in the face of extremism.
We are reintroducing patriotism, Britishness, Englishness, a non-racist Britishness. No matter what colour your skin is, we would rather stand with one proud black patriot than 100 scumbag racists. That's where we stand.
It would be fair to say that he doesn't like the Islamic faith and he doesn't like the extremism and the violence that people do in the name of it. But being critical of a religion is not racist. There are legitimate criticisms that you can make about Tommy Robinson, but from what I've seen, the accusations that he's a racist or a white supremacist don't hold any water. Now back to the numbers. We also have to remember that this is just the people who showed up. What about the other people who agree with the people who turned up to this rally who either couldn't or didn't turn up? Which is why, again, I think it would be a very, very huge mistake for politicians to completely ignore this. Many of the people who turned up to the rally described it as having a very festival-like feel to it. There was music, speeches, families were present. They also recited the Lord's Prayer and chanted Christ is King.
Christ is King! Christ is King! Christ is King! Christ is King! Christ is King!
Elon Musk even made a digital appearance at the rally, and this has also dominated headlines, with many mainstream media outlets accusing him of inciting violence because he said the following.
Elon, to so many of the British public who are scared to exercise their free speech, they're worried about being imprisoned, they're worried about being attacked, even to share their speech on your platform of X. What message would you give to them?
The message is really, my message is to the reasonable centre. They don't want, they're quiet, they just go about their business. My message is to them, if this continues, that violence is going to come to you. You will have no choice. You're in a fundamental situation here where whether you choose violence or not, violence is coming to you. You either fight back or you die.
Now, there are multiple interpretations of what Musk meant when he said that. Some people, as I said, have interpreted it as him inciting violence. Others have interpreted it as more of a warning, arguing that if we don't change course now, then things could get more hostile because of increasing social tension. I guess you can decide for yourself what you think he meant when he said those words, but if I'm being entirely honest with you, I do find it very bizarre that the same outlets who will call everyone far right and who will say absolutely nothing when people are throwing around words like Nazi and fascist, etc. The kind of language that tends to radicalize people enough to think that it's necessary for them to either attempt to assassinate or to assassinate public figures. I find it very interesting that the same people who say absolutely nothing about that suddenly clutch their pearls when Elon Musk says something like this. The crowd also played tribute to Charlie Kirk by having a 1-minute silence, followed by Amazing Grace being played on the bagpipes. Now, as I mentioned before, there was a lot of mentioning of Christianity and a very strong Christian theme within this rally. As I said, there were many people chanting Christ is King, there were people who turned up to the rally holding crosses, and there was also a lot of mentioning of Christ as well as Christianity within the speeches. And Tommy Robinson also hired a gospel choir to be the closing act for the rally. And what was interesting is that when Christianity or Christ was mentioned during the speeches at the rally, the crowd were audibly roaring with cheers, which means that Christianity is no longer making people switch off, which for many people that has been the case for a really long time. But it seems like a lot of people are now very much in tune with the idea of bringing back Christianity in Britain. And I'm really fascinated by this because I would really like to know exactly what is triggering this Christian revival. I guess part of it could be because of hardship. The country has been through a lot, and during times of hardship, a lot of people do tend to find their way back to their faith because they're searching for a sense of belonging as well as a community, and Christianity offers people that. I also think as well that many people are coming to the realization that without Christianity, you don't have Western civilization, because ultimately many of the values and the culture that has shaped what Britain has historically been has come from Christianity and Christian values. There's a reason why the cross is at the center of the English and the British flag. In an interview, Trevor Phillips also gave his interpretation and his understanding of why he believed Christianity played such a big part within this rally.
I wonder it's also, Trevor, this sort of religion as nostalgia. This is why I'm suspicious of the rise of religions. In America, it's been long-standing. I think religion in this country is a shorthand for a sort of back to basics 50s sense of the time when there was a quiet parish church with no one else in it other than people born in the village. It's a code for something, religion, I think, sometimes.
Well, I suppose you can look at it that way, but if I may say so, that is the view, generally speaking, of people who are not religious.
Yeah, true.
People who are religious will think of it much more as a way of binding together communities, of making their friends, of finding the right kinds of groups for their children to mix with, and underlying it, inculcating some values. And by the way, I mean, let's be frank. It's okay for people like us to say this, but actually, there's nothing wrong with some nostalgia for some of the things of the past, which, if that means being decent to people, not yelling at them, not polluting your own community by dropping stuff all over the place, the small things that bother people.
Now, there were many people who were very skeptical about the purpose of this rally. They were very, very skeptical about whether or not it was going to really do anything. I saw a video of a man who was basically saying that the whole thing was a complete waste of time and to not even bother, essentially, because it wasn't going to change anything, and so your best bet really was to leave. And I would say I agree with many of the sentiments of the people who commented on that video. I don't think anyone is naive enough to think that this rally or this demonstration is going to drastically change the government. But what I think that demonstrations like this do achieve is attacking the nihilism as well as the apathy that many people currently feel within the country. Because I do think that the overall vibe and the overall mood that you could be seen within this protest or within this demonstration was hope. Many people were feeling extremely hopeful. And so I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this changes how people behave politically, because I do think that many people who may have thought that there was no point before and everything is useless, I imagine they probably have a slightly different perspective now. Now, Keir Starmer did comment on the rally, and he said the following: "People have a right to peaceful protest. It is core to our country's values, but we will not stand for assaults on police officers doing their job or for people feeling intimidated on our streets because of their background or the colour of their skin. Britain is a nation proudly built on tolerance, diversity and respect. Our flag represents our diverse country, and we will never surrender to those that use it as a symbol of violence, fear and division." I mean, the part about him saying that people felt intimidated on the basis of the colour of their skin or their background is quite an interesting one, because there were people from ethnic minority backgrounds who were present at the march, and many of them have spoken out on social media about how they had very positive experiences.
I went to the Tommy Robinson protest on September 13th and it was fine. I also went alone as well. I met my friend like 2 hours later in central London, but I was by myself and I went straight into the belly of the beast and I saw nothing but peaceful people, respectful people. I was even interviewing them. I asked them in my last TikTok. They're actually good people, and I knew I shouldn't have been afraid. I was never ever going to be afraid. The issue is a lot of minority cultures for them have become the predominant culture in areas of the UK like London, Liverpool, Manchester, Luton, to the point that these towns and cities become unrecognisable. And British people flee because they no longer feel a sense of connection or identity to these towns and cities. You wouldn't want to lose what it means to be black. We all love our culture and our ethnicity, and it's the same for white people. They love what it means to be English, and they're allowed to love that.
It's not racist to enjoy where you come from. My family were immigrants. My heritage is not from the United Kingdom, but I'm born here. It's not racist for me to enjoy the UK because it's given me a great future. To me, it's not a protest, more of a festival. People embracing the culture of the UK, come together to unite with each other. No matter your heritage, people showing love to one another.
I was at the London protest yesterday as a Muslim who's been in this country for 3 years, right? I've got no British blood in me. In all honesty, I wasn't there to kind of show support to whatever protest, whether it's with or against, right? This is not my country. I live here. I am proud that I live here and I love this country with all my heart. I love its people. And I was there just to kind of see what's going on, you know, to hear from the people on the streets rather than news, rather than what you see on social media or whatnot. What I've seen on the ground is so different than what I've seen on TikTok or on Twitter or wherever it was. And I've got no benefit of saying or making this video. I made a video yesterday about it and I got some sort of people questioning like, you're Muslim, you're Arab, and that march was basically against you and against everything. Millions of people there. I would say, let's say if there's 3 million yesterday, probably like 500,000 people were against me and my kind of people. The rest were just there for their country. And the ones that are there for their country are the ones that I respect and love, and the ones that I had decent conversations with yesterday. Shout out to the guys that I had proper heart-to-heart conversations with yesterday. I've never received more hugs in a single day in my life. I've never been treated better all in one day than yesterday. So, you know, I love seeing the English flag up. I love seeing you guys celebrate your country. It's your anger and your frustration is valid. And you know, I wasn't there to kind of show support or pick a side or whatnot. I represent myself and myself only, and I only care about politics that are and have to do with my home country, which is Jordan. But yeah, man. God bless England.
I don't doubt that there were definitely people who are from ethnic minority backgrounds who felt very intimidated and scared because the march was going on. But I personally would argue that that's probably much more to do with the way that the mainstream media reported the march, as well as other people on social media, how they've discussed the march. I mean, the march has largely been described as far-right, anti-immigration. So I can completely understand why someone who is seeing all of that, who maybe didn't go to the march themselves, could see all of that in the media and see all of that on social media and feel scared to go to the streets. I mean, the rally even had speakers who were from ethnic minority backgrounds, one of them being Ben Habib, who was met with very loud cheers and people chanting his name. Plus, Keir Starmer might be a little bit salty about the rally because throughout the day people were chanting this. Now, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, also did his fair share of vilifying the people who attended the rally, as he released this statement. I know many people, particularly from London's diverse communities, are feeling extremely worried following the events this weekend. It takes me back to how I felt when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, when far-right political parties marched on our streets. The leaders of the far-right are once again attempting to hijack our flag, with minorities being intimidated and fear, hatred and division being sown. As Londoners and proud Brits, we must unite to reject the far-right, just as we have many times before. But it's going to take a huge effort from us all, from people of all races and backgrounds who are willing to stand up for our British values of equality, inclusion and mutual respect. As Mayor, I will continue to do everything I can to challenge the far right and all those who peddle the politics of fear and division. I urge other politicians and Londoners to do the same. Now, when you have the Mayor of London releasing statements like that, then of course it's understandable why you'd have some people who are from ethnic minority backgrounds feeling intimidated and scared of the people who take part in these protests or marches. And I would say that if anyone is peddling fear and division, it would definitely be Sadiq Khan. I mean, his statement reeks of us versus them mentality. But I guess because the people taking part in this march wouldn't be voting for Sadiq Khan anyway, because they don't share his vision. So I guess to him that makes them fair game. But it's not just politicians. The media as well have been representing these movements as being far-right or anti-immigration, which is quite deceptive because when you hear anti-immigration, it implies that the people who took part in this demonstration were against immigrants, even though some of the people in the march were immigrants themselves or come from immigrant backgrounds themselves. The honest truth is many people are not against immigration as a whole. Many people are very much against illegal immigration as well as rapid mass migration. But I guess to some people, having an issue with immigration in general or having any issues with immigration at all, to them is inherently racist. Which is interesting because I do wonder if they would still feel the same way if they knew that many immigrants also have problems with immigration.
Bro, so I've got one more question for you. Do you feel like illegal migration into the UK is becoming a big problem?
100%. Really and truly, I think we need to change the system of migration in general. I think anyone that comes to this country because of whatever reason they need to come to this country, whether it's unsafe or whatever, they need to understand that this country has its own history, its own culture, its own way of life, which is not a problem. Live here, like I am. Respect them. You know what I'm trying to say? But if you're gonna come to this country to change it or want them to be submissive to you or to, you know what I'm trying to say, just take over. It doesn't matter. You could be white, black, Arab, or Asian. Just fuck off. I'm being serious. If you're trying to change this country, fuck off. But if you're gonna be living here and respecting the people here, then no problem.
You would be surprised how many immigrants voted for Brexit. And you'd also be surprised how many immigrants would happily vote for a politician who wanted to tackle and control immigration. Now, some people might hear that and think, well, that's a bit hypocritical, but let me explain something to you. If you're a legal immigrant, then you have probably gone through the very long and lengthy process and often expensive process of coming into the country legally. You would have had to wait your turn and go through the front door, which meant following the laws of the country you were trying to settle in. Now imagine you watch people who don't bother to go through that process, don't bother to actually follow the laws of the country, and yet they get to cut in line and they also get to have access to the very things you had to pay for. Meanwhile, you had to do things legitimately and you had to work hard and pay into the system before you were even allowed to use it, while you see other people not doing that. In fact, they get to have access to all of those things without having to contribute anything. And on top of that, the rules that legal migrants have to follow don't seem to be applied equally to those who come to the country illegally. For example, if you come to the country legally, you have to meet certain requirements if you wish to bring over your family member. You must earn at least $29,000 a year and provide suitable accommodation, and your family member needs to be able to demonstrate that they can speak a basic level of English. However, when Yvette Cooper was Home Secretary, she announced that the government would temporarily suspend the new applications under the existing dedicated refugee family reunion route. So under that route, those who came to the country illegally and claimed asylum, they were able to bring their family members over with no conditions. Compared to other European countries like Denmark and Switzerland that make refugees wait 2 years before applying to reunite with family in order to give them time to find work and housing to support their loved ones when they arrive. In contrast, in the UK, for a very long time, those applications have come in on average in around a month, often before the refugee has even left the asylum housing. They are making applications to bring their family over when they're still in those asylum hotels. And so as a result, Cooper said many refugee families are applying to councils for help to stop them falling into homelessness, making up more than a quarter of homelessness cases in some local authorities. What that means is, for many years, our very irresponsible government has been importing welfare dependents. So now think about it from a legal migrant's point of view. You followed the law, you're a legal migrant, you work hard, you pay your taxes, you never got any of these things for free. And now on top of that, you now have to deal with the increasing negative attitudes towards migrants and ethnic minorities, which are largely being caused by the issues that are happening in the country with illegal migration. And as a hardworking, tax-paying legal migrant, you have also been forced to fund this stuff through your taxes. Now, if everyone was a genuine asylum seeker, a genuine refugee, it would be fine. But let's be honest, many are economic migrants who are exploiting the system. And you have to be honest and acknowledge that. I have never in my life known a country who, during genuine times of war, put all the men on a boat to flee and made the women and children stay behind. That being said, I do think a lot of the anger is misplaced. I will always hold the view that any anger when it comes to the situation should always be aimed at the government. People only do what they're allowed to do, and if the government didn't let people do these things, then they wouldn't do them. As that old saying goes, don't hate the player, hate the game. I also saw this video on X, which I thought was interesting.
Look, it's popping over here. It is popping over here. Get out of my country, man. Let me get that. Let me grab that Indian street food. Oi, oi.
Now, I suppose if you believe what some believe, that these demonstrations were filled with far-right people who hate immigrants and are super anti-immigration, then I suppose that video would be amusing because, of course, it does appear very hypocritical. However, I think if you actually listen to the people who turn up to these marches, who express the reasons why they're there, then you can understand that this is just evidence that they're not racist. If they're happy to support businesses run by immigrants or run by descendants of immigrants, then how can they be staunch racists? And I do think it's also important for people to actually see and hear what the people who attend these protests and attend these rallies actually think, rather than just creating an idea in their heads of what they think they think.
Hi there, nice to see you. What brings you to the event today?
I've come to every one of them for the last 2 years. I believe in Tommy because he tells the truth. I wrote to Tommy every fortnight when he was in prison last year. And if he's the only one who can open his mouth and give us freedom, then there is that. We need freedom of speech. We need freedom of being able to move around. And we definitely don't need a prime minister that's a flim-flam man. We need a strong leader. And I tell you, advance Ben Habib is your man. Not Nigel Farage, he's rubbish. He changes his things like he changes his socks.
It's the first time that I've really done any type of protest like this. I've been to sort of periphery thing, but I've never done anything like this. And I was just instigated from the perspective of being of, immigrant stock. My dad was Jamaican, but, I'm an Englishman. I feel, I'm proud of it, right? And I see what's happening to the country at the moment, and especially what's happening to the veterans. I'm just disgusted with it. So, I decided...
Tell me about that, because we don't hear about the veterans very much anymore.
It's all about the fact that you've got guys, dying in streets and things like that, street corners and the rest, and doorways and things, and they've contributed, they've been willing to give their lives for this country, and they do absolutely nothing for them, absolutely nothing. And, yet you come over here on a boat, and I'm all for immigration, I'm of immigrant stock, right, but do it legally, right, and don't just put them up in hotels and all the rest of this and all the leniency and things. I'm just disgusted with it, really.
We, as British people, no matter what race, what creed, where you come from, if you're born in Britain, we should be put first. And that's it.
We supported our country. Lots of other people support the country in their own way. But everybody here, by a certain demographic, is smeared as being far right.
And you don't feel like you're far right for being
right. I voted Labour in the past.
I'm too old to be a far right man. I'm 64 years old. I've got grandchildren. I'm worried about them.
This is the first ever protest that I've been to.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's kind of a big deal to me. The reason that I sort of came out was just, I suppose what everyone would say would be to stand behind a common cause. That cause being illegal immigration. Legal immigration is absolutely great for this country, and I truly love it, and it's really what makes this country amazing, what makes it great. But to pinpoint illegal immigration, I feel like, not just for me, but for a lot of people here, that's what we have the problem with, specifically that.
Now, as I mentioned before, Tommy Robinson has announced that he does intend to do another rally, and my prediction is that it's probably going to be bigger than the one that's just happened. Largely because he has been doing these for some years now, from my understanding, and they do keep growing in size with each one that he does. Because I imagine that word of mouth is playing a very big role in it. The amount of people coming out and saying they had a very positive and very good experience. I'm sure that those people will then tell their friends, tell their family, and so more people will come. Elon Musk's endorsement has probably given it a lot of promotion as well. And also, I'm sure there were people who were on the fence about whether or not they wanted to go. And after seeing just how insane the turnout was for this one, I'm sure they're probably going to also want to go and turn up and see what everything's all about. Especially when you consider the fact that a lot of people like feeling like they're a part of something historic. And so I can imagine that many people will turn up to the next one if Tommy Robinson does arrange one. One thing is for sure, that demonstration caused shockwaves across the country and shockwaves overseas. I have seen people from other parts of the world, like Australia, Canada, for example, talking about how they feel inspired by what they've seen. And so it will be interesting to see if other parts of the world who are experiencing similar problems to the UK also start following suit and doing their own similar movements. Overall, when it came to the reporting of this event, I found that aside from Sir Trevor Phillips, most outlets definitely leaned more towards the negative. Which, if you don't agree with the overall perspective of the attendees, then fair enough. But I do think it is very possible to disagree with their position without the far right name calling. When it comes to the politicians, I think that some of the ways in which they spoke about this event was extremely irresponsible. There was a lot of vilification when it came to the people involved, and very little time was taken to acknowledge their legitimate concerns. The reason why I found their responses irresponsible is because I personally didn't appreciate the fear-mongering rhetoric being used to instill fear into people from ethnic minority backgrounds. I do think stuff like this contributes to social tensions because it doesn't allow any space for empathy, and it also doesn't allow any space for nuance. The nuance being, yes, there are people who turned up to this march because they do have concerns with immigration. However, the concerns that many have in regards to immigration is largely to do with illegal immigration, which is a valid concern to have because if people are entering a country illegally without any documentation, then you have no idea who these people are and you have no idea whether or not they're safe or not. And the other concern that many people have is with rapid mass migration, because often when you have a large number of people enter a country in a very short space of time, it's a lot less likely that those people are going to integrate. And this can lead to cultural clashes, which can be detrimental for social cohesion. And when it comes to the topic of immigrants, I also think there's a lack of nuance in regards to the varying perspectives of people who come from immigrant backgrounds. Many, if not most, are able to be empathetic towards people who are natively English. Many are able to understand the concerns that they have about immigration, how it's changed the country, how it's affected the culture. Many immigrants also disagree with those who come to England and refuse to assimilate, and not only refuse to assimilate but try to change the culture and force their way of life onto others. But often the way these things are reported in the media don't acknowledge any of this, and so in the end you just end up with two very angry groups who think that they are enemies when in reality it's the mainstream media and politicians who are sowing that division. But I do also think that there is an elephant in the room when it comes to this conversation, and that is the topic of birth rates. The fact of the matter is English people are not having babies. And for as long as that remains the case, the topic of demographic change will always be on the table, and the topic of immigration will also always be on the table. Because I am personally of the opinion that all the governments that come into power will have very little incentive to stop immigration, because at the end of the day they need workers. And so if English people are not having children and replacing themselves with their English children, then the government will replace them with foreigners. Everybody has their own role to play in why we're here today. But perhaps with the revival of Christianity, we might also find that the birth rate might improve, as religious people are far more likely to get married, far more likely to have children, and are also more likely to be opposed to abortion. But I guess we shall see. But that's just my thoughts on what happened on September the 13th, as well as my thoughts on what mainstream media as well as politicians had to say about it. I would be very intrigued to know what you think about all of this. Did you go to the march? Do you know anyone who went to the march? And what's your general view of this movement as a whole? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to read your thoughts on this. If you found this video interesting or you enjoyed it, you may as well like and subscribe. Thank you so much for giving me your time today, and I shall see you in my next one.